If you are on Social Security disability, or you love someone who is, here is something that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it stated plainly and directly. You can return to work, earn any amount of money, and keep every single dollar of your disability check at the same time, for a real, specific window built into the program on purpose, not as a loophole anyone discovered by accident. This is a deliberate federal work incentive, and not knowing it exists keeps people trapped in poverty out of fear of a rule that does not actually work the way they think it does, sometimes for years longer than necessary. Today, I am walking through exactly how Social Security disability actually functions, since it runs on a completely different set of rules than standard retirement benefits, including the 9-month window almost nobody uses, what happens after it ends, and the safety net that exists if working again does not ultimately work out the way you hoped. My name is Robert Hensley, and every week I go through the actual federal rules behind programs like this one, because the fear of losing a benefit you depend on keeps people from ever learning the actual rule that governs it. And that fear costs real families real money every single year. I am not here to sell you anything, and if you are new here, hit subscribe and tap the bell now, since new videos post every Wednesday and Sunday. Two very different groups are watching this right now, and I want to speak to both before we get into the list, because each of you has been operating on an assumption that is not quite accurate. If you are already receiving Social Security disability, you have likely heard from a friend, a forum, or your own worry late at night that working at all could cost you everything. And that fear is understandable, but it is not accurate. And it has likely cost you real opportunities already. If you are newer to this, applying now or supporting a family member through the process, you likely assume disability benefits work the same way retirement benefits do, a fixed monthly amount that only changes with an annual cost of living adjustment and nothing else. It does not work that way at all, and the difference matters enormously for how you plan your life, your budget, and your decisions around it. Stay with me through this whole list, because the 9-month rule is the single most important thing on it. And I am not going to make you wait until the end to explain exactly how it works. Before we get to working again, let us start with how benefits begin in the first place, since this trips people up immediately and causes real financial stress in the meantime while waiting for that very first payment to arrive. Social Security disability has a 5-month waiting period, meaning your payments start the 6th full month after the date SSA determines your disability actually began, not the date you applied, and not the date you were finally approved months or sometimes years later. This often confuses people who expect payment from day one or assume the clock starts when their paperwork gets processed by an examiner somewhere. The good news hiding inside this rule, if the medical evidence supports it, SSA can pay retroactively for up to 12 months before your application date, which means a long approval process does not necessarily mean lost money. It can mean a larger first payment once approval finally comes through, months or even years later than you originally expected. Here is the rule I promised you, the single most important fact in this entire video, and the one that changes everything about how you should actually think about working again. Once you are receiving Social Security disability, you are entitled to a trial work period, 9 months, not necessarily consecutive, counted within a rolling 60-month window, which gives you real flexibility rather than a single unbroken stretch you have to complete all at once. During every one of those 9 months, you receive your full disability payment, regardless of how much you earn, whether that is a few $100s or several thousand in a single month. A month only counts toward your 9 if your gross earnings cross a specific threshold set each year. Currently around $1,210 a month for 2026, a figure that adjusts annually. So confirm the current number directly with SSA rather than assuming it stays fixed year to year. Earn below that line, and the month does not count against your 9 at all, meaning modest part-time work can sometimes never use up your trial period, stretching your test window out for years if your earnings stay light and consistent. If that surprised you, hit like right now, so this reaches somebody who has been afraid to even try working, worried they might lose everything they depend on. And if you have not already, subscribe, since I will keep covering exactly this kind of work incentive nobody explains clearly the first time. Now, back to what happens once those 9 months are used up. Once your 9 trial months are used, you enter what is called the Extended Period of Eligibility, 36 months, 3 full years, where the rule changes but does not disappear or end your protection entirely the moment your trial period closes. During this window, your benefit is suspended, not reduced, for any month your countable earnings exceed what is called the substantial gainful activity level, currently around $1,690 a month for 2026, higher for beneficiaries who are blind. Again, a figure that adjusts annually and is worth confirming directly rather than relying on last year's number or something a friend told you. For any month you earn below that level during these 36 months, your full payment continues exactly as before, without any partial reduction or paperwork required to restart it after a gap. This is not a cliff that ends your benefits permanently the moment you cross a line once. It is 3 full years of the payment simply turning on and off based on that specific month's actual earnings, month by month, on its own. Here is a timeline worth knowing if health coverage is part of your planning, since it runs on its own separate clock entirely apart from your disability payment itself, and does not adjust just because your check arrives on time. Medicare eligibility for Social Security disability beneficiaries begins 24 months after your disability entitlement starts, not 24 months after your approval date, which combined with the 5-month waiting period typically adds up to around 29 months total, from the date your disability began to the date Medicare coverage actually starts, and you can use it for the first time. There is one confirmed exception worth knowing: ALS. Beneficiaries with ALS face no 5-month waiting period and no 24-month Medicare waiting period at all, made permanent by federal law in December of 2020. And ALS also qualifies for expedited processing under a program called Compassionate Allowances, built specifically for the most severe conditions where waiting simply is not a reasonable option for anyone involved. Compassionate Allowances is not limited to ALS. It is a standing list of severe medical conditions that SSA has already determined clearly meet the disability standard in advance, allowing claims to be approved on medical evidence alone, often in a matter of weeks, rather than the many months a standard application typically takes to work through the entire system from start to finish. If you or someone you love has a diagnosis that feels obviously severe, it is worth checking whether that specific condition appears on SSA's current Compassionate Allowances list before assuming the standard, slower timeline automatically applies to your situation, since it genuinely might not once you actually check. Here is the safety net that makes trying to work again far less risky than most people assume, and it is worth knowing about well before you ever actually need it. If your Social Security disability benefits end because your earnings exceeded the substantial gainful activity level, and at some point afterward, the same condition, or a closely related one, makes you unable to sustain that work again, you do not have to start over with a brand new application from scratch, waiting through the entire process a second time. Expedited Reinstatement lets you request your benefits back within 5 years of the date they ended, and SSA can pay up to 6 months of provisional benefits while they review your case, so you are not left without income during that entire review period. If your request is later denied, you generally do not have to repay those provisional months, unless fraud was involved in the original request itself. This exists specifically so that trying to work again does not feel like an irreversible gamble with no way back if it does not ultimately work out the way you hoped it would. Picture a man named Roosevelt, 58, who had been receiving Social Security disability for 4 years after a serious back injury ended his career as a delivery driver. He had worked for over 2 decades without missing more than a handful of days. He had heard secondhand from a friend at church that any paycheck at all could end his benefits entirely and permanently. So for years, he turned down a part-time position at a friend's hardware store that would have paid him modestly but meaningfully, out of genuine fear rather than any real understanding of how the actual rule worked. When he finally called SSA directly and asked plainly what would actually happen if he tried, he learned about the trial work period for the first time in 4 full years of receiving benefits, took the part-time position, and kept his full disability payment every single month, while earning extra income on top of it at the same time. 8 months in, his back pain worsened, and he had to stop working again. Because he understood the rule this time, this did not feel like a crisis the way it once might have. His disability payment had never stopped for a single month, and he simply returned to his prior routine. 4 extra trial months still available to him whenever he felt ready to try again in the future. Here is a bonus item specifically for family members of someone receiving Social Security disability, since attention naturally goes entirely to the person who is disabled. A disabled worker's spouse and children can potentially receive their own separate benefit payments based on that worker's earnings record, called auxiliary or dependent benefits, in addition to what the disabled worker themselves already receives each month. This is often overlooked entirely, since most families never think to ask about anyone besides the primary beneficiary. But if you are the spouse or child of someone on Social Security disability and have never asked whether you personally qualify for a benefit of your own, that is a genuinely worthwhile phone call to make this week, not someday. Here is what to actually do with this, starting today rather than continuing to guess based on secondhand information. If you are on Social Security disability and have been afraid to try working, call SSA directly and confirm your own trial work period status before assuming any amount of income puts your benefit at risk unnecessarily. If you are already past your 9 trial months, understand you are likely still inside your 36-month extended period of eligibility, where earning below the substantial gainful activity level still means a full payment that month, not a reduced one. If your benefits ever ended because of work and your condition has worsened again, ask specifically about expedited reinstatement rather than assuming you must start a brand new application from the very beginning. And if you are the spouse or child of someone on disability, ask whether you personally qualify for an auxiliary benefit of your own, since it costs nothing to simply ask the question. Let us recap quickly. Social Security disability includes a 9-month trial work period where you keep your full payment regardless of earnings, followed by a 36-month extended period of eligibility, where your payment turns on and off based on that month's earnings against the substantial gainful activity level, not a permanent cutoff. Medicare eligibility typically begins around 29 months after your disability onset, except for ALS, which has no waiting period at all under current law. And expedited reinstatement means losing your benefit to work is not necessarily permanent, since a 5-year window exists to get it back without starting over completely. Everything in this video is general education about how these federal rules work, not personal advice for your specific case. So confirm your own current thresholds and your own trial work status directly with the Social Security Administration before making any decision based on it. If you know someone on disability who has been too afraid to try working, share this video with them today. And if you have got a question about your own situation, drop it in the comments. Every Friday, I answer real viewer questions over on my Posts tab. If this helped you, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you catch every video the moment it goes live, since I will keep breaking down exactly this kind of rule that keeps getting misunderstood. Fear of a rule you do not understand should never be the reason you stay stuck, whether that is you or someone you love. This channel provides educational information only and is not affiliated with the Social Security Administration, Medicare, CMS, the IRS, or any bank.